Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my podcast. My name is Doug Ross Williams, I'm sure you know by now, and I'm studying a PhD at Liverpool Hope University Creative Campus on Hope Street. An amazing university. And today I'm going to be exploring probably my biggest area of my studying, which is ADHD. There's some given elements that I'm sure you know around being neurodiverse, whether it's dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and many other forms. But today we're really going to be digging deep into ADHD. I've never been a fan of the word ADHD. And like I've always said that, I don't have a deficit and we do not have a disorder. And I think both those words clearly demean me as a person. So yeah, if I use the word neurodivergent throughout this podcast, it's still we are exploring ADHD. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So today we're joined by an amazing guest who I had the pleasure of meeting last year at the ADHD Foundation conference. And his name is Archie Chimanayi. And he's also the CEO of ADHD Care in London. So without further ado, Archie.
Welcome. Hey.
Welcome.
I'm here. I'm in Liverpool. Can you believe that?
And just a short story. He actually came down yesterday for, Africa. Oh, yeah.
Of course. Yeah. I missed it last year, and me and Doug have been talking for the last year, and I couldn't miss it this time. So
amazing, wasn't it yesterday? It was absolutely great. Amazing.
Really loved it. And if you haven't witnessed it, anyone out there, I'll definitely say look up for it next year.
Yeah.
Amazing conference. Liverpool's an amazing city, and you know.
That's why I live here. So, Archie, so we're throughout today and the podcast we do, we're gonna explore some really deep questions, and hopefully me and you can have those things that are, challenging the paradigm, so to speak. So,
yeah.
For everyone watching at home, I know who you are, but in a brief 3-4 minutes, explain who you are and your company, etc.
Of course. So, thanks, Doug, for having me as a guest on your lovely podcast, which I've been following and listening to for for a number of years now. I admire what you're doing, and I'm a very passionate advocate for neurodiversity. So my name is Archie. I work for a company called ADHD Care Limited, which is based in London. Also, we operate from our Surrey offices as well. Set up the company back in 2018. So we've been for the last 6 years. Yeah. I come from a background working in the NHS. I'm qualified as a nurse by background, and eventually specialising in neurodiversity for the last 15 years.
Wow. Okay.
So I've worked with children, young people in services like CAMS for a number of years, and then later on in my later career, I moved to working with adults. Again, specialising in neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, all the things that Doug mentioned there. In our practice, we are a private service, so we specialise in all things ADHD, autism mainly. So we do assessment, diagnosis, and treatment. So, we see young people, we see adults. They come through assessment, we go through in-depth holistic assessment process to eventually, getting the diagnosis, and we offer them a package of treatments, which might involve medication, talking therapy, coaching. We liaise with the community a lot as well. So I go into schools a lot. Some schools invite me to come and give talks on neurodiversity. I go into some inset training for teachers. A few years back, I used to get invited to GP surgeries, interestingly, which was, that's something that I always wanted to go and do, to try and educate some professionals like GP social workers around this topic of neurodiversity. And, I'm very still, that's my passion. I love educating, raising awareness and breaking down some of these barriers. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much what I do. Alongside that, I'm a podcast host as well. I know. So I'm a host of a podcast called the ADHD Care Podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we can be found on all kind of streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts as well. So yeah, we do similar to what you do, Doug. We bring guests on and we dissect this topic around neurodiversity. So if anyone wants to listen to the podcast, I'll say just feel free to check it out.
No, I'd like to dig in, in this podcast a bit about some discussions you've had, your findings, and that'd be probably really great. So I mean, Archie was just talking about, being ADHD. And I think the audience at home know that I have now been officially, confirmed as ADHD. I think I always knew that I was a bit different from some kids, the way I was in school, and not being able to, as I said in the past, being able to focus in the classroom setting, being disruptive, learn more from doing creative arts. And I think for me, moving forward, what I want to get out of my PhD, Archie, is to hopefully add to the knowledge pool in terms of the way we can approach young kids that are on the spectrum. I mean, you were just talking about the higher level of kids that have been failed at school because they're neurodiverse. And it's not because they can't learn, it's that maybe they can't learn in a specific format or style. That probably, as we say, the paradigm needs to change. I'm championing now, as part of my PhD and the work I've done, because I've been asked to go into many, many schools over the last 20 years to deliver, especially creative arts projects, because a lot of these schools do know that the kids that are failing at school, once you bring some dance or some drama or some creative writing, different approaches to learning, these kids that are failing seem to really benefit from that form of creative learning. So it's not rocket science to think then, if these schools, academies and free schools, who quite evidently bring in practitioners and creatives like me to engage with their kids, I think it's time now to look at changing that paradigm in most schools. In fact, virtually in every school, that there's an opportunity if the child learns didactically. I'll explore that word with you in a moment. Then allow them to learn didactically.
Yeah.
I couldn't learn didactically. I can't sit down and learn, parrot learn, repeat, listen. I ask a lot of questions. I like to try out things with my hands. So hence why I say for maybe half the population, whatever that ratio is, who want to learn more in a creative way, that should be a given. It shouldn't even be a maybe. And I think that's where I think I'm really putting up my energy in my latter years of experience, and hopefully been able to make change through. I'm working with the universities, local schools, and the city council to try and bring about a change where there is that provision in schools for creative learning. So we're going to start, Archie, by asking you about 5 questions that I've asked all my other people on my podcast, but it's great just to see how each person approaches the answers. I'm sure your answers are going to be just as interesting. So you ready for your first question?
Yeah, all right.
So, what is your knowledge and understanding of neurodiversity?
Okay. Yeah, I think we've heard this term being bandied around for so many years, and I think some people might not really understand what that means and what it captures. And I feel we all have neurological differences, how we see things, how we operate, from how you learn. Some people are left-handed, some people are right-handed. Some, like you described, the way of how you take information and learn, which is different to others. And I think it's the first point to highlight is we all have different ways of how we absorb information, take things, how we are genetically made up. So if you think about neurodiversity, you see this as variations in the human brain. So I think it also emphasizes these differences should be recognized and respected, really. So I think it's about shifting the perspective from viewing these conditions as deficits as well, and seeing them as different ways of thinking and the way of how you experience the world.
That's a very, very deep answer, Mr. Archie. I mean, my knowledge and understanding, because I like to have these kind of debates of neurodiversity. The word is new, of course, as you said, but if you put the end bit, diversity, and I think I had a colleague on the other day, Talia Johnson, who mentioned about diversity and why that's added on, but diversity is difference. And neurodiversity, in a nutshell, is just difference of different approaches, the way we analyse, how we learn. So for me, understanding neurodiversity, if you ask me, it's about every brain is different. Like, as I said, every fingerprint is different. And you're right. I think from my standpoint, that we should all be able to accept that diversity in terms of everyone and not be judged by because you can't read a letter, and that's dyslexia, of course, as you know.
Yeah.
But some people, it's just the way their brain functions. Not that they're stupid, but most people think, oh, you can't read. Oh, you must be stupid or dunce.
Yeah.
But ask that person maybe to. In fact, a lot of people that I know that are in very high-flying jobs. It's the young lady I had on here, and Annette Mellor, who was an amazing musician, she said, but couldn't read sheet music, and so she had to give up her long life thing to be a musician, just because she couldn't read sheet music, even though she was an amazing musician. And that, to me, if you look at that, just like dyslexia, and then be judged by that and put down, and imagine how many kids must have been failed because they thought, oh, I must be stupid, so we'll put them at the bottom of the class because they can't read. And it's not that. It's just the way they look at maybe the way they look at images and how. What do you think about this dyslexia? Do you think it's more a thing of not understanding the words, that the way they look, what's your take on how you think the mind, when some people struggle to read words but yet are very intelligent? What's your take on how that?
I think the thing with dyslexia, we know obviously it's part of the neurodiversity kind of umbrella term as we describe it. And if you think about the brain differences in terms of how it receives and interprets information, which is different to the traditional way of other people viewing. We expect, like, now I've got my iPad, which I've got some
some notes.
Exactly, I've got some notes,
yes.
But the text is black and the background is white. For me, it's fine. For someone else who might have dyslexia or who might be, have difficulties with their vision, it might not be. So am I then forced to have to be on an iPad that has black and white text, rather than us going, okay, that's how you prefer to have your sites, you prefer to have text on different color background. I think it's just looking at those little things that we can just adapt. We're not asking too much sometimes.
I like that.
And I can take this question on a whole different
No.
If we talk about dyslexia, I see it as that. I think it's just how your brain and mind processes information, be it where the text of information is written, anything else around it, your understanding of the information as well. It's about, and I think when someone has which is why I see a lot of people that are queried of having ADHD. Sometimes there's a query whether they might have ADHD. I don't know if you've seen that before. So I've seen a few young people that have come through the route of, they're not really able to sit down and concentrate or read the information. They can't process it, take it all in. Is that because they've got dyslexia? I think traditionally people would go down the dyslexia route.
I could read. I could read really well.
Yeah.
And when I was doing English, I loved the English language, Shakespeare.
Right.
But it was learning in my own time.
Right.
But if I sit in the classroom and learn maybe English within half an hour and be learning within that moment, I couldn't. But I could go away and learn a whole recital of Othello or Iago over a week in my own time, not under pressure. So I think there's different elements of the whole neurodiverse spectrum, and some might involve a bit of dyslexia and attention deficit. Some might have a bit of autism and dyslexia. I think this is said about the whole umbrella, and in any area of any brain, it can have a mixture of different things, and that's what you need to take into account when you're looking at the left-hand side of neurodiversity rather than the far right-hand side. And then there's a middle ground where most kids can probably meet, but there are some people on the far left spectrum that really do need to just have a different format and way of learning. Archie, question number 2. Tell me about your work and how it tackles and supports the development of neurodiversity.
So through my work, as I mentioned at the start, as a company, what we do, we specialize in assessing, diagnosing and treating individuals that have ADHD, autism, neurodiversity. So so our work essentially, people come to us, reach out to us, they'll usually through recommendations or other professionals refer to us, and we go through a rigorous process of doing what we call screening. So not everyone comes through our door or comes asking the question of whether they might have ADHD or autism, gets a diagnosis. So it's also, we abide by the, I don't know if you know about the NICE guidelines, which is called the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, guidelines on assessing, diagnosing, and treating conditions such as ADHD and autism. So we obviously, that's our guides that we follow, whereby we do a thorough screening, whereby we send some questionnaires to the young person, the adult, or the teachers to complete. And then once all the information has come back, we sit down and go through it as a team and decide whether that individual requires a further assessment, which obviously warrants an in-depth in-clinic assessment for autism or for ADHD. Sometimes we do combined assessments. As you know, some of these conditions overlap, and sometimes it makes sense to actually do it all at once rather than do them in silo. So that process, obviously, as I said, is very in-depth. We do it as a multidisciplinary team. And then following on from that, if someone does eventually get a diagnosis, they'll be offered various treatment options. Again, going back to the guidelines that we follow for young people, children, depending on how severe their symptoms are. It could involve some psychoeducational work, which could be parenting work for parents, education. So it's not saying we're criticizing you as a parent when we say you need to go to a parenting group. And I think sometimes parents get a bit mixed up, whereby we're not judging you as a parent to say you require parenting training. It's more how you parent a child with neurodiverse needs. And I think that's very important to emphasize that it's nothing to do with you as a parent. I'm a parent of a child with a neurodiversity. Certainly I've got my 9-year-old son. So I'm coming in from a point of, I've got lived experience of, having seen my son grow up, eventually getting the diagnosis at the age of 6 with autism and ADHD. So there's so many things I can relate. And
can we digress for a minute? Just off track. So your son who's got ADHD, what brought about your attention to that situation? Did you know straight away, or was the symptoms? And if so, it's just for someone watching it, because they might have concerns about their child or might not understand why. So what made you brought you around to think of your son and then having him officially then tested?
And this is nothing to do with me working in the field, whereby I was thinking about work home, because I was the last person to actually pick it up, funny enough. Well, not funny enough, but honestly, the school, actually, it was the preschool that actually mentioned it first. I think when you have a boy, he's the first, I've got 2. He's the first, when you have a boy and you think it's just a typical boy, very boisterous, and you always think you grow up, I'm very old school with how I viewed it. Never did it cross my mind that, there might be something going on here. So things will be said, like in nursery, preschool, he will sit on the carpet. He's the one who's getting easily distracted. They're finding that to keep him busy, to give out the books, to keep him occupied throughout the day. And it's not only when he reached to year 1, when obviously I think that's the stage where they expect you to sit in your chair for longer and to do proper, structured lessons, where the teachers on one of the parents' evenings sort of mentioned that, we know you work in the field, but has it ever actually occurred to you that, your son might have it? So, and us as parents, I think that was the last thing that we thought. Certainly, I wasn't looking for a diagnosis for him. I just, as I said, took him as just a typical boy. But I think that's what triggered everything, the school actually mentioning it. And then that's the point when I actually started to pay more attention. And then the kind of professional me kind of kicked in at that point. I was like, okay, I need to observe him. And I went into the, observation. I think the school referred into the pediatrician, the community pediatrician. Naturally, that's what happens. At that age, they'll usually refer you to a pediatrician to just rule out, not just ADHD, but they might be picking up other things as well. Thankfully, he was already under the pediatric team because he had some allergies when he was growing up. So the process was fairly quick for us. And eventually, to fast forward from there, he subsequently then got the diagnosis. So to answer your question, it actually wasn't myself. But certainly when the question was raised, I looked at it a bit more and I could see. And certainly now, absolutely.
And just one more question, just digging just a bit deeper on that. What have you put in place now to support you as parents to support his neurodiversity?
I think for me, the most important thing that I think parents can, advise parents is to pause and try and put yourself in your child's world. And I think for me, as a professional, as a dad, I need to fix everything. And I think I did a podcast that we were discussing with other dads where we were like, what's our experiences of this? And I think naturally me, I was into, okay, autopilot, what do we need to do? I didn't pause and kind of want to process and absorb this darkness that he had. So initially, I think what I'd say is pause, reflect, understand that this child that you thought was gonna be, I don't know. I'm not saying that he won't be high flying and end up in Cambridge and whatever. We always have dreams and aspirations, and sometimes when you're faced with a child with neurodiversity, sometimes they kind of throw you off track. But I think the most important thing is to think that with the right support and treatment, he can still go to Oxford and Cambridge and be a successful footballer and whatever he wants to do in life. It's just how much support he will need to go through that path. So I think, the first thing was for myself to put myself in the parenting shoes rather than being a professional. And as much as I run parenting workshops and I do things, but I actually put myself in a parenting shoe where I actually put myself to go to parenting workshop as a parent to actually get educated about ADHD and listen to other parents, which was quite difficult for me to sit in there and listen to a professional in doing what I tend to do. But it was good that I was able to connect with other parents and we were able to discuss some of the challenges, some of the the great things about our children, and certainly, and then certainly for me it was this school. Once he got the diagnosis, checking in with the school, monitoring progress, update from the school, very important as well. Just keep the lines of communication clear, and as a family, as a couple, parents certainly, and sometimes children, particularly with neurodiversity, can get mixed messages. If you're parenting in one different way, the other parent is doing the other way. So, me and the partner, we had to sort of sit down and work out how we can go to support our son. We're still on that journey. He's 9 now. He got the diagnosis 3 years ago. So, and as I said, he's got autism as well. So you can see the two worlds. He's, when the ADHD is kind of fairly settled, you can see the autism and I think for me, definitely to more about understanding how his world works and not to get frustrated with so many things that you could go like, and you start to compare, because I've got another daughter as well who doesn't have neurodiversity needs, and you start to think, why can't you just do this like your sister?
It doesn't work. Do you know what? Any parent that's watching Archie at home, I hopefully like these little podcasts that we create can help, even if it's 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or 20 people learn from your experience of how you circumnavigated of your son. But I do want to just jump in about the becoming, like going to Cambridge or becoming, successful. I do believe that many neurodiverse people are successful and learn to circumnavigate and get into Cambridge and stuff. And I think it's only when the Industrial Revolution started, but in terms of changing the whole schooling system. But before that, you were allowed to be creative and learn creatively. And I don't think, like for your son, for instance, once he finds his path, and that's why I'm putting this up, that I don't think any young person who's neurodivergent should be able to, or do get into Cambridge, the top schools, because I think you do have to be a bit, anyway, to be thinking outside the box and pushing boundaries, and usually that is associated with being neurodiverse. But I think it's, as me and you're discussing this today, the different elements of how we assess and look at neurodiversity. And I said, as for your son, I don't know, he might be a very gifted scientist or gifted physicist or something, but may just have certain elements of things that just manifest in a certain way in children. But I want to say that if your son wants to go to Cambridge, you go to Cambridge, or you go and be whatever you want to be.
Absolutely. Think about all the celebrities as well. That their ADHD hasn't stopped them from being successful. Richard Branson, Will.i.am, Michael Phelps. All of what you just said in the back of what you said there, it's just about finding your niche and you as parents supporting them in that way. Not everyone is made for Cambridge.
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
But go and do your research and you'll find out many rich and famous people are classed as neurodiverse. Anyway, are you ready for your next question, Mr. Archie Chimanayi? How does ADHD care support neurodiverse people to understand how to navigate day-to-day life with all the elements that neurodiversity brings?
So, yeah, so we do this in all kinds of ways, really. So I think the first step is once someone has received the diagnosis, that's key. I feel it's allowing them to process the diagnosis. And I think there's a process of understanding acceptance before you actually go down the route of, okay, what do I need to do now? And I think we are very, we advocate for that. So we always, give people time. You've had the diagnosis. What does this mean to you?
It's cathartic. It's cathartic. I had that.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah. So rather than bombarding them with too much information, or you need to go to this parenting group, some people just need time to sit with the diagnosis and process it. If it's an adult, understand what does this mean to me? I've had a life, we see, older adults and sometimes in their 60s, where they've had a life of living a certain way, and then they get to 64 and then they get this diagnosis, and someone feels grieving. Someone feels like, oh gosh, I wish I knew about this when I was 40 or 20 or in school. So that whole process sometimes is celebrated, which is, I know now what's the issues, but sometimes it's a process and sometimes we guide through them. So we have an ADHD coach who's really good at kind of helping clients through that journey, understanding what this means to you. It's a young person, again, working through the parents and trying to get the young person's voice as well. So I'm very advocate for young children, like listen to their voice, try and simplify when we explain the diagnosis to them in a very child-friendly way. What is ADHD? Trying to harness some of the kind of the positives that ADHD brings, rather than just the deficit, which we don't like the word, don't we? Looking at the strengths, and I wish that we could change the term ADHD. I've said it on my podcast so many times. It's misleading, and I feel a lot of people are shying away from coming forward when they hear the term ADHD. Certainly, because they think that's not me. They think traditionally it's a hyperactive young person bouncing up and down, climbing the walls. Not necessarily knowing how it presents, certainly, in adults. We have, clients where it could be your mind racing, it could be your executive functioning being challenged, which is all still part of the ADHD. So it's to try and change the term as much as it's hard to change the word itself, to try and educate them. So yeah, the process is the psychoeducational process and coaching. I mentioned about coaching. We do workshops, groups. We run our podcasts. We do lots of outreach work as well. As I said before, I'm talking about education training in schools and things. But most importantly, just keeping the lines of communication open to our service users to say that we are here through, on our website, there's so much information, resources and things. But sometimes everyone has different ways of absorbing information, like what we were saying before. Some people don't prefer to read. Some people want to listen to a podcast, some people want to go to workshops. So yeah, it's all about looking at how we, share that information in various ways, harnessing with technology as well. I think we're going to come to that in a second when we talk about creative learning and didactic learning. But I won't say much about that. But yeah, so for young people, we know they love technology, iPads and things. So how can people go on TikTok nowadays, social media.
There's a variety of ways you mentioned now that creative people or children can learn moving forward. I absolutely agree. And that actually brings us on to a really deep part of my PhD, which I've I started with different areas of my PhD that I want to explore, but mainly it was creative and performing arts learning for neurodiverse kids. That was kind of like the parameter, Archie, of where I started my PhD. But after some deep conversations, I ground it down till I'm doing a symposium in October. Please do come along if you're interested, around the key word creative learning versus didactic learning. And I think I'm going to ask you this now. But for people watching at home, I did mention in my last podcast the difference between didactic learning and creative learning. And listen, I've been teaching and going into schools and kind of knew what the difference, creative learning and why it was beneficial. But it was only through a deep conversation I had with my supervisor, maybe about 5-6 months ago, Archie, where I was saying, academic learning, I never could learn academically. And he said, I think you might be confused with the word academic learning, because I think we can all, but if you're specifically talking about a method of what I think you're talking about, that would be didactic. And I never heard the word. I think I might have some, in my, but yeah, so now with my podcast and what I'm doing in my PhD is really digging deep with especially people like yourself, Archie, to really dig deep into this question about creative learning versus didactic learning. So we're going to move on to tell me, Archie, what do you think of those two elements of ways of learning and how they work?
I think creative learning, I think certainly for me, is about an approach which engages like innovation, engagement, trying to look at someone's learning styles, preferred learning methods. It's more tailored to that individual's needs as well, rather than it being this is the traditional way of how we teach, certainly, which is the didactic side of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
which if you think about education system as such, that's kind of how it's set up. Naturally, I'm not going to sort of try and attack education system as such, but I've had discussions with teachers and the schools. If you think about their training as well, that's how traditionally they don't have training around neurodiversity. So I think they do, but it's very minimal. It's only like literally 2 hours throughout the whole training.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it starts from there. If you can think about in a class of 30, how many neurodiverse children are you going to have in that class?
Maybe 50%, maybe 40 or 60. Either way, it's hard to know sometimes.
And why are we still kind of promoting this didactic way of learning when we have 40 to 60% of neurodiverse kids in the class who prefer to learn and absorb information in a different way? I've had discussions with my son's teachers as well, certainly, to some extent, which, it's hard for me to go in as a parent and at the same time the professional that I am to some schools where I'm actually trying to wave this flag and I'm saying, listen, my son or this person prefers to learn in this way. Have you thought about, okay, young people love technology, love iPad. You can actually get a young person to do a lot of learning through an iPad rather than a piece of paper and a pen, which is the traditional way of doing it. How about they love being outside?
Yeah.
Can we not be creative enough to say we can still get them to do whatever ones that they need to do? It's just the way of how creatively we can think of doing that and harnessing on their interest.
Yeah. It's that simple. I mean, I know you can't say it's that simple, but I just, and sorry to interject, but I, as you say, if it's a money thing, whether it's a system that is broken, I mentioned probably the Industrial Revolution 100 and something years ago was when the whole format of schooling that we're going through was created. Before that, there were scholars and teachers were not like how we say the word teachers. There were people that were mentoring you to achieve your full potential. In the old Greek, Latin of a teacher. But now, if someone says to you what teachers, that's a person in the classroom with 30 kids, and I don't want to, as it said, like you, pull down the education system, but how can one teacher, with 30, 40 kids in the classroom, really teach a child? Because as we just said, maybe 30% of those kids need one-on-one teaching. They need it. I think and without that, all the distraction with like 30 kids in the classroom, those, what you say, 20, 30% will fail because they feel left out, ostracized. They don't feel that they are being paid attention to. Sometimes they're told off if they're asked too many questions. And I was sent out of the classroom, go and get the slipper, you're being naughty. Only because sometimes I just was too much. So as I said before, in terms of what I'll let you jump back in. In terms of didactic learning, I seriously believe that it's failing, unfortunately, a lot of children at this current moment. But did you finish your?
No, I was thinking, we were discussing as we were walking here about the rate of exclusion for young people with SEN need is high. I read an article the other week actually about this, just on the news, and I don't think I don't know, as a society, are we not taking it seriously? I see it through, my son's schooling as well. I see it generally in my work. I think some schools, they use the behavioural policy far too often with some children with neurodiverse needs. I'm not saying, these children need to get away with it if they're being violent or being threatening and all of that, but certainly it's about looking at it as some of these things could be, okay, they don't want to sit down and do their work. Okay, Is it because they're just being defined, or is it because they're being expected to sit down in a loud, cloud, noisy environment in front, next to the window, where there's going to be distraction? So they can't do their work because of that. Some of it just purely looking at the classroom environment itself. It's about how can we make it more neuro-inclusive? Can we make it much more less stimulating? Can we make it, things, we're not expecting them to change things or to, I know there's funding issues with education, but certainly some of these things that need to be adapted could be small, slight changes that you as a teacher with neurodiverse experience can just look at your classroom setup, look at your children, because you see them all the time and every day. This young person struggles with this, that, and the other. It's just about making those small changes, be it a visual timetable, now and next board that says, okay, we're going to do this, movement break, and trying to incorporate the whole class, not just the young person being, picked out and say, you need to have a movement break. It's about, okay, whole class, let's get up, let's just, do some small exercises. It's those little things that, will make a difference.
No. And thank you for that, Archie. And I think what I was saying, because with the ADHD Foundation, they've got this new testing system that I want to bring into, a project that I'm starting. So I think added on to that, if you imagine this scenario, if you could test a young child, say at 7, and that test would show that child learns creatively, didactically, I think that's when you jump in and you say, right, if this child is a creative learner, there should be a pathway clearly set where kids, look, we want to learn creatively or do learn creatively, go to I would say creative schools, creative learning schools, and those that I do fear and have no issues with learning didactically and following and like to work in a specific format, they go to your standard didactic school. That it wouldn't be rocket science to offer those two alternatives, because every child has the right to learn. Every child has the right to go to school, and every child has a right to not feel as if they're not adequate or been berated because they don't learn in a specific way. So, for me, it's not rocket science. If I was the head of the education system, I would either offer creative learning schools or didactic learning schools. Moving forward, what are your thoughts on the best methods to support neurodiversity?
For me, I would say, because obviously we're talking about education here, certainly some of these things apply to workplace environments as well, but certainly focusing from an educational aspect, I'd say offering personalized learning plans, that would be a good start. Using technology, we talked about technology a lot, and also providing continuous training to educators on neurodiversity. Going back to what we were saying about the actual training for teachers doesn't involve a lot of neurodiverse training itself, or much of it anyway. I think continuous training throughout their teaching career also helps. That way they can meet with other teachers, they can, get trained up and have scenarios. I've been involved in some of these trainings, and certainly it's nice where you can come and discuss scenarios and you can, learn from each other. Certainly I'll say that's definitely one thing that some teachers will benefit from. And just having this culture of acceptance, whereby we understand each individual as them, rather than seeing it as they're children to not want to learn or they're misbehaving because of. I want to try to find a reason as to why they can't access their education properly. I think it's about assessing the individual. Certainly, what I'm saying is so difficult. You should say before, it's a class of 30 young children there, and we expect a teacher, if there's 20% of young children that have neurodiverse needs in the class, to actually do a full assessment for each young person. But certainly, I think it's about tailoring the needs for the individual rather than it one size fits all, as much as they can with the resources that they have. And I think some of these things comes down to funding, and I get it. But I think there's small steps that could be done to start with, which we discussed about making the environment more conducive, and discussing with the young person. Sometimes when they get to a certain age, young people tell you, I struggle with this, I prefer to learn this way. And I'm all for listening to young people as well. So, and just keep the lines of communication open with parents, other professionals involved, and for teachers, if they feel they'll need to reach out externally to another professional for a second opinion or to get additional support for the young people, certainly, that would be definitely welcome. So I would say all of this promotes kind of strength-based approaches, which is very essential for empowering neurodiverse people going forward.
Yay! Another great answer from another person that's worked in the ADHD kind of area for quite some time, and I do appreciate you coming down today and having this deep discussion around neurodiversity. This is a really good question I ask everyone,
Yeah.
and everyone answers it differently.
Okay.
I mean, so let's see how you deal this final question, Mr. Archie. If you had a magic wand, how would you change the paradigm of educating and supporting young neurodiverse people for the future? If you wave a wand, what would you do?
I love that word paradigm. We discussed it, didn't we?
When we first, do you know what?
Yeah.
Actually, before you answer that question,
Yeah.
me and you met in a wonderful kind of thing called a nuke.
Oh yeah.
And in my PhD, I've actually mentioned about the capabilities of this nuke, and when especially whatever we call young people who are neurodiverse, who sometimes need a space where they can go into and have a one-on-one. The colors can change within this thing, you know, the nuke, and there's a variety of things you can use it for. What was your take on the nuke, and what do you know about how it supports neurodiversity?
So for anyone who's not aware of what a nuke is, so it's like a boot. It's
Boot.
all insulated, soundproof, insulated. It's amazing. You've got, as you say, you've got the colours that change in there, the atmosphere that you feel when you go in it. So just try and imagine. So we were in a massive like auditorium that day, where there's so much noise, so much going on. There was talks and stalls, people like walking around. Me and Dal, we sat into this nuke, right, and we were recording a podcast. And immediately, like us sitting in there, like it felt like calm. It felt like we were shut off completely from everything else that we could see in the same room. That transported me to like some sort of space that I couldn't believe that. It's great, and I think the sound, and I think certainly like having something like that, which you could put in a, as I say, if it's a busy environment, if it's a school, it doesn't use up a lot of space.
No, not at all.
You can have 3-4 people sitting in there. You can have one person.
Yeah.
You got, you can have your computers, your everything that you need. It's less distracting. It's very calm. It's like a central room, put it that way, which is just like transforms into this like magical, like
I love
peaceful, like world, which is great. So, and nuke certainly, I think certainly for the neurodiverse individual, everyone that I was interviewing, that I was bringing into the nuke, there was commenting positively about the experience that they felt. Even some individuals that didn't have neurodiverse needs, they were like, wow, I love this, put them in a space of calm. And certainly I can see young people like benefiting from that. And I think as a company, they've literally tapped into a really good industry, because obviously they came to the neurodiversity conference last year. And certainly the more people know about it, I'm hoping that, these nukes could be used in different settings, even in the workplace. You can have it in the workplace. You can have it in
I love the idea of having nukes in at least one or two in each school.
Yeah.
And anyone watching this podcast, I will put a little link for you to find out a bit more about the nukes. And if you were thinking of having one in your school, or you've got an education establishment, or even if you just want one, even for your staff members and stuff, to have a chill out when stressful, I think it's got so many different uses to help you bring around a sense of meditation and calmness when all seems to be going crazy around you. Because as you said, it's like just going into a different world.
Yeah.
And yet there was a lot of, maybe 300 people in the actual conference space, but it felt like, as you say, we were just like oblivious to all of that. Mad. One interesting day today has been with a good colleague of mine, Archie, Chimanayi, and the conversation we had around neurodiversity. We're going to the final question, which is probably my favourite. Archie,
Yes.
If you had a magic wand, what would you do to change the paradigm of educating and supporting young neurodiverse people for the future?
Heavy. If I had a magic wand, I think I would, if there was any way, I would transform the education system to be fully inclusive, adaptive to individual needs. And I don't know if you've heard about the term universal design for learning.
No.
UDL. It's all about what we discussed pretty much. It's about adaptive learning. It's about ensuring accessible and flexible learning environments, providing mental health support integrated within that. Opportunity for diverse cognitive, to meet everyone with different diverse cognitive abilities, and ensuring that these are celebrated, ensuring that there's personalized learning paths, enhancing use of technology and hands-on experiences, which would allow each student to thrive. So that's one term for you to take away and go and do some research. Universal design for learning.
Universal design for learning. I would definitely like to look into that, Mr. Archie.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's an article on understood.org, which is a great website for neurodiversity. I don't know if you know about it, but they have lots of resources. It's free. You can access it. Anyone can just go online. And there's a video of a teacher who's in a classroom setting. So the teacher himself has ADHD, and he's showing us different methods of how to adapt his learning or his teaching to support students that have ADHD in his classroom.
Brilliant.
It's fascinating. And he's talking about the universal design for learning. So, yeah, definitely. And I think some of the things that I've talked about today, he's mentioned that in the video. So for anyone who wants to look that up, just go to understood.org on their website and just search for universal design for learning, and it should come up.
Every time we do a podcast with someone new, I think it adds a lot more to my developing my PhD, my understanding and learning around neurodiversity. So I'd like to thank all my guests thus far that have been on my podcast. I think next week we've got some amazing tutor named Matt Rutter coming to talk. He's also neurodivergent, but also come to talk about his wonderful work over the years that he's done with me around drama and physical theatre. I've got some good colleagues from Birmingham, drama university, to talk about their work with the use of drama. And then what I'm doing is I'm breaking it down into singing, and then into maybe circus. So anything, all the creative areas that we can approach, creative writing. So I think over the next year, it'll be about just breaking down all those various creative methods of learning and just see where we go.
Yeah.
And how that works. So Archie, can I shake that hand of yours?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on my podcast.
Thanks for having me, Dom. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure too. And we're going off to APCO,
Yay.
So stay tuned for some more on my podcast, Creative and Performing Arts Learning for Neurodiverse Young People. Okay?
Take care.
Ciao.
See you later.
Color.